I pulled up to the curb, the engine idling as my kids, Logan and Ava, chattered excitedly in the back seat about their first day back at school. Their happiness should have been contagious, but all I felt was a knot of unease twisting in my gut. I didn't need a crystal ball to know what was coming. I could already picture her, Natalie, my ex-wife, standing there like a queen surveying her subjects, with Ryan at her side, smug and ready to throw his weight around. It was their signature move, and I was the unwitting audience yet again. "Daddy, are you okay?" Ava's small voice pulled me out of my thoughts. Her wide, innocent eyes stared at me from the rearview mirror, and I forced a smile. She didn't need to see my tension. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's your big day, remember? Let's make it awesome." I turned off the car, grabbed my bag, and stepped out, helping Logan and Ava with their backpacks. Their excitement was contagious, a bubble of pure joy in an otherwise tense moment. I was just about to close the car door when I saw them, Natalie and Ryan. Their smiles were too wide, their postures too calculated. My stomach sank like a stone, but I kept my expression neutral. No way was I giving them the satisfaction of seeing me rattled. "Jason," Natalie greeted, her voice dripping with faux politeness. "What a surprise to see you here." I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. "It's school drop-off, Natalie. Where else would I be?" She smirked, a gesture I'd once found charming but now only found infuriating. "Well, you know, some parents are late or distracted. I wasn't sure if you'd be on time." It wasn't a dig. It was a missile aimed at my character, one she'd been launching since our divorce. Ryan stood behind her, his arms crossed, his face wearing that self-satisfied smirk he always wore. It screamed, "I got your life now, and you're just a supporting character in mine." "Logan, Ava," Natalie squealed, her voice turning syrupy sweet as she crouched to their level. "Come here, my darlings. Did Daddy make sure you had everything for school?" Logan gave her a polite nod, while Ava glanced at me before stepping forward hesitantly. My daughter was sharp for her age. She sensed things no one else did, and I could tell she didn't like the tone her mom was using. Ryan chuckled, a low, arrogant sound that grated my nerves. "You know, Natalie, it's so nice to see Jason still trying. Even after all this time." "Still trying?" I echoed, my jaw tightening. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Oh, nothing," Natalie said, standing back up and brushing invisible lint from her designer coat. "We're just so proud of how you've managed." Managed? Like my life was a train wreck, they were graciously applauding for staying on the tracks. My fists clenched at my sides, but I forced myself to stay calm. They wanted a reaction, and I wasn't going to give it to them. "Logan, Ava, let's go," I said, my tone firm but kind. I guided my kids away, but of course, they weren't finished. "Jason," Ryan called after me, his voice oozing mockery. "Don't take it so personally. We're all here for the kids, right? No need to make it awkward." I turned back, meeting his smug gaze with a steady one of my own. "Awkward? No, Ryan. Awkward would be me commenting on your parenting, but I won't stoop that low." His smirk faltered for a split second, and I almost smiled. Almost. As I walked my kids toward the school entrance, Logan turned to me. "Why does Mom always act like that?" "She's just being herself," I replied, trying to keep it neutral. He didn't need the ugly truth. Not yet. But as I looked back one last time, I caught the faintest shift in Natalie and Ryan's expressions. Their smug smiles had faltered, replaced by something harder to read. For a second, I wondered if they'd seen through the calm facade I'd worked so hard to maintain. And then it hit me. Maybe they hadn't gotten under my skin as much as they thought. Maybe their cracks were beginning to show. As Logan and Ava skipped ahead, I straightened my shoulders. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The knot in my stomach from earlier was still there, but it was morphing into something else as I drove away from the school. Something sharper. Anger. Natalie and Ryan's smugness wasn't new. I'd lived through enough of their theatrics to know their game. But this time, it hit differently. Maybe it was the way they dismissed me in front of Logan and Ava, planting seeds of doubt about me in my kids' minds. Maybe it was Ryan's condescending tone, or Natalie's fake smiles that barely masked her digs. Either way, I wasn't going to let it slide. Not anymore. As I pulled into my driveway and killed the engine, I found myself gripping the steering wheel a little too tightly. My knuckles turned white, and for a moment, I let the frustration wash over me. Natalie had spent years spinning her narrative, painting me as the barely keeping it together ex-husband. Ryan, her loyal audience, played his part perfectly, chiming in just enough to keep the facade intact. But today, as their smirks faltered, I realized something. They were overplaying their hand. I wasn't the man they thought I was anymore. I stepped out of the car and walked into the house, the familiar creak of the front door grounding me. The silence was a stark contrast to the chaos at the school, and for a moment, I just stood there, letting it settle. Then, with a deep breath, I headed to my office. If Natalie and Ryan wanted to play games, it was time for me to stop playing along. I booted up my computer, the faint hum of the machine filling the room as I sat down. This wasn't a moment for blind anger. I needed to be strategic, calm, collected, and prepared. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before I started typing. I began going through every detail of my business, the numbers, the contracts, the upcoming deals. I wasn't looking for problems. I was looking for solutions, leverage, anything to fortify my position. And there it was. The numbers. They didn't just look good. They looked exceptional. Better than even I had realized. In the past 6 months, I'd secured 2 major contracts that were now yielding steady returns. On top of that, an email from my accountant confirmed an upcoming meeting with a potential investor. A meeting that, if successful, would turn everything around. A grin crept onto my face. Maybe Natalie and Ryan had assumed I was still struggling, clinging to the remnants of my post-divorce life. But they didn't know the full story. They didn't know that I'd been rebuilding, brick by brick, while they were busy living in their bubble of self-satisfaction. The truth was, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. And soon, they were going to see it for themselves. I leaned back in my chair, the pieces of a plan starting to form in my mind. The investor meeting was in 2 weeks, and if it went the way I expected, it would solidify everything. I'd not only save my company, but also position it as a contender in a highly competitive market. That wasn't just a win. It was a statement. A statement that I was far from the managed man Natalie had smugly described. A soft knock on the door broke my focus. "Daddy?" Ava's voice was tentative. I turned to see her standing in the doorway, her backpack still slung over one shoulder. "Ava, what's up? Shouldn't you be at school?" She gave me a sheepish smile. "I forgot my lunch. Mommy said she packed it, but it wasn't in my bag." Of course." I walked over and crouched to her level. "No worries, sweetheart. I'll make you a new one. Let's get you back to school." As I prepared her lunch and drove her back, I thought about the incident at the drop-off line. Natalie's little oversight wasn't a surprise. It was a pattern. A pattern of carelessness masked by her constant need to appear perfect. But perfection was a fragile thing, and the cracks were beginning to show. When we arrived back at school, I caught sight of Natalie and Ryan talking to another couple by the entrance. Their laughter echoed across the lot, but I saw the way Natalie's eyes darted to me as I walked Ava toward her class. She tried to cover it with a smile, but I didn't miss the flicker of discomfort. Good. Let her wonder. Let them both wonder. As I walked back to the car, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Control. For years, Natalie had dictated the narrative, and I'd let her. But now, I wasn't just reacting to her games, I was creating my own. And this time, I wasn't playing to survive. I was playing to win. The drive back from Ava's school was calm, at least on the surface. The radio hummed quietly in the background, a soothing melody that should have eased my nerves. But my mind was elsewhere, turning over Ryan's smug comment about buying out my company. Buying me out? Was that their big play? The thought made me tighten my grip on the steering wheel. For years, I'd worked tirelessly to build my business from the ground up, sacrificing nights, weekends, and so much more. And now, my ex-wife and her glorified sidekick thought they could swoop in and take it all? It was laughable and infuriating, but mostly laughable. When I got home, I headed straight to my office again. If they were serious, I needed to know the specifics. What was their angle? How deep did this go? I logged into my business accounts, scanning through the latest updates, but everything seemed normal at first glance. My contracts were solid, my cash flow was steady, and the investor meeting was set. But Ryan's comment lingered in my mind like a splinter. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Then it hit me. This wasn't just about the business. Ryan and Natalie had never hidden their disdain for me. This was personal, a calculated attempt to undermine me, to reduce me to the shadow of the man I'd become. And the worst part? They thought I wouldn't see it coming. Think again, I muttered, sitting forward and typing Ryan's name into a database I used to track business registrations and investments. It wasn't long before something popped up, a series of LLCs connected to Ryan. Most were small, insignificant ventures. But one caught my eye. A newly registered company with a vague description about consulting and acquisitions. My stomach twisted. Consulting and acquisitions? It was clear as day what their plan was. Ryan had likely been sniffing around my industry, trying to find cracks, weaknesses, any point of entry to make a bid for my company. The arrogance of it all. Thinking they could outmaneuver me. They didn't even realize they were playing with fire. But what I found next wiped away any trace of humor I'd felt about their antics. An email buried in my spam folder caught my attention, flagged as urgent. It was from a mutual connection, a vendor I'd worked with for years. The message was short but packed a punch. Jason, I've been approached by someone claiming to represent your company. They're asking for details about your upcoming projects. Thought you should know. My jaw tightened. Ryan. There was no doubt in my mind it was him. He'd been fishing for insider information, trying to get ahead of me by any means necessary. This wasn't just underhanded. It was illegal. I immediately replied to the vendor, thanking them for the heads up and asking them to forward me any further correspondence. Then I picked up my phone and called my accountant. Hey, I need you to run a quick audit, I said, keeping my voice calm despite the storm brewing inside me. Specifically, look for any unusual requests for financial data or project details in the past 6 months. Got it, they replied. Everything okay? Not yet, I said, but it will be. The call ended, and I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. So that was their plan. Spread just enough misinformation to make my business look vulnerable, then swoop in with an offer to save it. It was conniving, sure, but also reckless. They'd underestimated me, and I wasn't about to let them off easy. By the time Dean got home, I'd gathered enough evidence to confirm my suspicions. As much as I hated to admit it, Natalie and Ryan weren't just playing games. They were launching an attack. But what they didn't realize was that I'd already begun building my defenses. As I explained the situation to Dean, his usual laid-back demeanor shifted. He listened intently, his brow furrowed. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. So, they're trying to take over your company? Not just the company, I said, my voice hardening. They're trying to discredit me, to make me look weak, like I can't hold it together. Dean's jaw clenched. That's low, even for Natalie. Yeah, well, it's not going to work, I said. They think they've got me cornered, but they don't know what I've got planned. Dean nodded, his hand resting on my shoulder. Whatever you need, I'm here. That simple statement grounded me. For years, I'd fought these battles on my own, but now I had someone in my corner. Someone who believed in me, not the version Natalie had crafted in her stories. The next morning, I made a few calls, starting with my lawyer. I need you to look into something, I said, discreetly. There's a chance someone's been fishing for information on my company. As the wheels began to turn, I felt a sense of clarity. Ryan and Natalie thought they were a step ahead, but they didn't realize they'd tipped their hand too early. Their arrogance had given me the edge I needed, and now, it was my turn to act. By the time I got to the office, my inbox had a message from the accountant. The audit revealed another surprising detail, a sudden spike in inquiries from companies connected to Ryan's LLC. It was all the proof I needed. This wasn't just a battle anymore. It was war, and I intended to win. As I sat in my office, staring at the evidence laid out before me, it became clear that Natalie and Ryan weren't just dabbling in sabotage, they were fully committed. Ryan's LLC wasn't just a vanity project, it was a weapon aimed directly at me. I had proof of their attempts to pry into my business and disrupt my partnerships, But that wasn't enough. I needed to turn their tactics against them, to show them that I wasn't the man they thought I was anymore. I leaned back in my chair, tapping a pen against my desk as a plan began to take shape. Natalie and Ryan thought they could exploit my vulnerabilities, but they'd underestimated one crucial detail. I'd spent years rebuilding not just my business, but myself. They were still fighting the old me, the one who used to crumble under Natalie's manipulations. That man was long gone. The first step was securing my position. I couldn't risk Ryan making any more inroads with my business partners, so I started making calls. The conversations were brief but strategic. I reached out to key stakeholders, subtly reinforcing our relationships without tipping my hand. I didn't mention Ryan or Natalie, not yet. For now, I simply reminded them of the value we built together and the opportunities still ahead. By the time I finished the last call, I felt more confident. My foundation was solid. But that was just the beginning. If Ryan wanted to play dirty, I'd show him how it was done. Legally, of course. I called my lawyer again, this time with a more pointed request. I want you to dig into Ryan's LLC, I said. Specifically, I need to know who's backing him and whether there's anything questionable about his dealings. My lawyer didn't miss a beat. Consider it done. Give me a day or two, and I'll have something for you. With that piece in motion, I turned my attention to the investor meeting scheduled for the following week. It wasn't just another meeting anymore. It was my ace in the hole. If I could lock down that deal, it would give me the leverage I needed to counter whatever Natalie and Ryan were planning. I spent the next few hours refining my pitch, anticipating every question and objection that might come up. By the time I was done, I felt ready for anything. Or so I thought. That evening, as I was packing up to leave the office, my phone buzzed with a new email. The sender's name stopped me cold. One of my top clients. My stomach tightened as I opened the message, expecting bad news. And sure enough, it was worse than I'd imagined. The client was pulling out of a major contract, citing concerns about the stability of my business. The wording was vague, but the implication was clear. Ryan's meddling was already starting to take effect. I sat there for a moment, the weight of the setback pressing down on me. But then something shifted. The old me might have panicked, spiraling into self-doubt and fear. Not this time. I wasn't going to let Ryan or Natalie see me falter. If anything, this only fueled my resolve. I picked up the phone and called the client directly. I just got your email, I said, keeping my tone calm and professional. I'd like to address any concerns you have about our partnership. The client hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. Jason, it's not personal. We've just been hearing things. Rumors about financial instability, potential buyouts. It's enough to make us reconsider. Rumors, I repeated, my jaw tightening. I understand. But I want to assure you, those rumors are just that, rumors. My company is in a stronger position than ever, and I can't provide you with any documentation you need to confirm that. The client seemed to soften. If you can back that up, we might be willing to reconsider. I'll have everything to you by tomorrow morning, I promised. And if you have any other concerns, don't hesitate to reach out directly. Transparency is important to me. By the time the call ended, I felt a small sense of relief. The contract wasn't lost, not yet. But it was a reminder that Ryan's tactics weren't just annoying, they were dangerous. If I didn't act quickly, he could cause real damage. The next morning, my lawyer called with an update. You were right to dig into Ryan's LLC, he said. There's something interesting here. Several of his backers have questionable reputations, and at least one is involved in a pending legal dispute. I felt a spark of satisfaction. Anything we can use? Potentially. It's enough to raise red flags, especially if he's trying to position himself as a legitimate player in your industry. Good, I said, a plan forming in my mind. Let's compile everything. I have a feeling it's going to come in handy. As I hung up, I realized that Ryan's arrogance might be his greatest weakness. He'd overreached, assuming I wouldn't fight back. But now I had the tools to not only defend myself, but to put him on the defensive. I spent the rest of the day preparing, finalizing documents for the investor meeting, reinforcing client relationships, and working with my lawyer to build a case against Ryan's interference. By the time I went to bed that night, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Control. Natalie and Ryan had underestimated me, and soon, They were going to regret it. I've always believed in staying one step ahead. It's not just a mantra, it's survival. And now, as I sat at my desk with evidence of Ryan and Natalie's schemes spread out before me, that belief was more important than ever. They'd been poking at the edges of my life, trying to find weak spots. What they didn't realize was that the harder they pushed, the stronger my resolve became. Ryan thought he could quietly infiltrate my business circles and unravel my reputation. Natalie thought she could stand smugly by, acting like the queen of the chessboard. But this wasn't their game anymore. It was mine. The first order of business was solidifying my relationships. Ryan's antics had stirred up doubts among my clients, so I made it my mission to extinguish those flames before they turned into a wildfire. I reached out to each of them, personally. These weren't quick phone calls or emails. I scheduled video meetings, walking them through every detail of my company's financials. I laid out projections, highlighted successes, and answered every question with unflinching honesty. It was exhausting, but it worked. By the time I finished the last meeting, the feedback was unanimous. My clients were back on board. Ryan's whispers weren't enough to sway them once they'd seen the truth. That was one fire extinguished. But I wasn't just playing defense, I was ready to strike back. I began leveraging my network to quietly gather information about Ryan. He was new to the industry, and his bold moves had ruffled more feathers than he realized. People were talking, and the stories weren't flattering. One connection, a mutual vendor, told me about an unpaid invoice Ryan had conveniently forgotten to settle. Another mentioned an aggressive pitch Ryan had made to one of their clients, promising services he couldn't possibly deliver. The picture was becoming clearer. Ryan wasn't just reckless, he was sloppy. I compiled every piece of intel into a growing file, but I wasn't ready to act on it yet. Timing was everything, and I needed to wait until I could deliver a blow that would really hurt. While I was busy shoring up my defenses, Ryan was doubling down on his efforts. The next move came in the form of an anonymous article published online. The piece was poorly written, but its intentions were clear. It painted me as a struggling businessman, desperate to keep my company afloat. It hinted at financial instability and cast doubt on my leadership abilities. I could see Ryan's fingerprints all over it. Subtlety wasn't his strong suit. Instead of reacting immediately, I forwarded the article to my lawyer. "We need to trace this," I told him. "Find out who's behind it." He chuckled darkly. "I've already got a few ideas. I'll get back to you." While my lawyer worked on that, I focused on the upcoming investor meeting. If I could secure their backing, it would be the final piece I needed to cement my position. The deal wasn't just about money. It was about sending a message to everyone watching. But as the meeting approached, I couldn't shake the feeling that Ryan wasn't finished. He was like a dog with a bone, unwilling to let go until he'd torn everything apart. That suspicion was confirmed when I received another email, this time from an old colleague. He'd been approached by Ryan, who was fishing for information about my past projects. The audacity was almost impressive. Almost. I responded with a simple message, "Thanks for the heads up. Let me know if he contacts you again." It wasn't much, but it was enough to plant a seed of doubt in Ryan's mind. He wouldn't know who was loyal to me and who wasn't. It was a subtle move, but one that I hoped would make him hesitate. By the end of the week, I felt more prepared than ever. My lawyer had traced the article back to a PR firm Ryan had hired, a firm with a questionable reputation of its own. That was the final nail in the coffin. Ryan thought he was building momentum, but in reality, he was stacking a house of cards. And when it fell, it wouldn't just collapse, it would implode. Before I called it a night, I sat down and wrote an email to my team. I didn't go into specifics about Ryan or Natalie, but I reminded them of our mission, our strengths, and the values that had gotten us this far. "This company was built on resilience," I wrote. "No matter what challenges we face, we will rise above them. Thank you for your hard work and dedication. I couldn't do this without you." When I hit send, I felt a flicker of pride. They might try to tear me down, but they'd never take away what I'd built. As I locked up for the night, I couldn't help but smile. Natalie and Ryan thought they were playing chess, but they didn't realize I was playing a different game entirely. The pieces were in place. Now, all I had to do was wait for the perfect moment to strike. The investor meeting was set for noon, and I arrived an hour early. Not because I was nervous, I was prepared, but because I wanted to own the room before anyone else even stepped in. Control the setting, control the narrative. That's something Natalie never understood. She'd always tried to dominate with theatrics, thinking the loudest voice won. But me? I'd learned to play the long game. I set up my materials, reviewed my presentation, and rehearsed my responses to potential questions. By the time the investors started arriving, the room felt like mine. When they walked in, I greeted them with confidence. Handshakes, eye contact, the whole 9 yards. The stakes were high, and I needed them to feel that I wasn't just ready for this deal. I was thriving because of it. "Jason, good to see you." One of them, Mr. Carter, said as he settled into a chair. "Heard some buzz about your company recently. Good things." I smiled, knowing exactly what buzz he was referring to. Ryan's little smear campaign hadn't gone unnoticed, but it had also backfired. The investors weren't just interested, they were curious. People love a good redemption story, and Ryan had unknowingly painted me as the underdog. "Well, Mr. Carter," I replied, my tone measured, "I think you'll find the reality even better than the rumors." The presentation went better than I could have hoped. I walked them through every facet of my business, revenue growth, market projections, and the key partnerships I'd secured. They asked tough questions, but I was ready. By the end, there wasn't a single ounce of doubt left in the room. "Jason," another investor said, leaning forward, "this is impressive. I've seen a lot of pitches, but this feels solid. I'm in." The others nodded in agreement, and just like that, the deal was sealed. As they left, I shook each of their hands, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. This was more than just a win. It was validation. But I wasn't done yet. As I left the conference room, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my lawyer. "Got the full details on Ryan. Call me when you're ready." Perfect timing. I stepped outside into the crisp afternoon air and made the call. My lawyer didn't waste time. "Ryan's LLC is a disaster," he said. "He's taken on more debt than he can handle, and his backers are starting to pull out. He's also made some legal missteps, nothing major yet, but enough to damage his credibility if it gets out." "Exactly what I needed to hear," I said, already forming a plan. The next step was a PDA meeting at Logan and Ava's school that evening. Normally, I would have skipped it, but this time, I had a reason to show up. Ryan and Natalie would be there, no doubt expecting me to slink into the background like always. They didn't know I had a bombshell waiting for them. When I arrived, the room was buzzing with small talk. Parents exchanged pleasantries, teachers shuffled papers, and the principal tried to herd everyone into their seats. I spotted Natalie and Ryan near the front, laughing with another couple. Their smugness was palpable, and for a moment, I let myself enjoy the anticipation of what was about to happen. I waited until the principal finished her announcements, then raised my hand to speak. "I'd like to take a moment to share some exciting news," I said, standing up. All eyes turned to me, including Natalie's. Her smile faltered slightly, but she quickly recovered, glancing at Ryan. "I recently closed a major investment deal for my company," I continued, keeping my tone steady and confident. "It's a partnership that not only secures our future, but positions us for significant growth in the coming years." There was polite applause, but the real reaction was in Natalie and Ryan's faces. Natalie's smile froze, her eyes darting to Ryan for reassurance. Ryan, meanwhile, looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. "But that's not all," I added, my gaze locking onto Ryan. "I'd also like to address some rumors that have been circulating, claims about my company's stability and leadership. Let me be clear, those rumors are false. The numbers speak for themselves, and the support of my investors only reinforces that." The room was silent, and I could feel the tension radiating from Natalie and Ryan. They were cornered, and they knew it. After the meeting, as people filed out, Natalie approached me. Her usual composure was slipping. "Jason," she began, her voice forced. "That's great news about your company." "Really?" "Thanks, Natalie," I said, my tone polite but firm. "It's amazing what you can achieve when you stay focused on the truth." Her smile wavered, and she stepped back. Ryan didn't even bother approaching me. He was too busy pretending to check his phone, avoiding eye contact. As I walked to my car, I couldn't help but smile. The bombshell had landed, and the fallout was only just beginning. Ryan and Natalie had played their hand, but now the tables were turning, and I wasn't done yet. By the next morning, the ripple effects of my announcement at the PDA meeting had begun to spread. Word traveled fast in our shared circles, and the buzz wasn't just about my new investor deal. It was about how I'd effectively shut down the rumors Ryan and Natalie had been trying to spread. It wasn't a win they could ignore, and I knew it wouldn't be long before they tried to counter. Sure enough, my phone buzzed just after lunch. It was a text from Natalie. "Jason, can we talk? It's important." I stared at the message for a moment, debating whether to respond. Natalie rarely initiated contact unless she had an angle, and I had no intention of playing into her hands. After a few seconds, I typed back a curt reply, "Busy. What's this about?" Her response came quickly. "Ryan mentioned something about business conflicts. I think we should clear the air before things get messy." Messy? That was rich, coming from her. They were the ones who tried to sabotage me, and now she was acting like the voice of reason. Still, her sudden concern piqued my curiosity. I decided to humor her, if only to see what she was angling for. We agreed to meet later that evening at a neutral spot, a small coffee shop downtown. I arrived early, finding a corner table where I could observe the room. When Natalie walked in, she was dressed to impress, as usual, her heels clicking against the tiled floor. But there was something different about her demeanor. Less confidence, more tension. "Jason," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Thanks for meeting me." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "What's this about, Natalie?" She hesitated, glancing around as if to make sure no one was listening. "Look, I know things have been tense lately. Ryan might have overstepped, and I don't want it to escalate." "Overstepped?" I repeated, my tone even. "Natalie, he didn't just overstep. He tried to undermine my business, spread false rumors, and poach my clients. That's not overstepping. It's deliberate sabotage." Her face flushed, but she quickly composed herself. "Ryan can be impulsive. He thought he was helping us secure opportunities. It wasn't personal." "Not personal?" I leaned forward, my voice steady but firm. "He used my name, my reputation, to push his agenda. It doesn't get more personal than that." Natalie fidgeted with her coffee cup, avoiding my gaze. For a moment, I thought she might actually apologize, but instead, she switched tactics. "Look, I didn't know the full extent of what he was doing. I swear. But if you're willing to let this go, I'll make sure he backs off." I almost laughed. "Let it go? Natalie, I'm not the one who started this. But I can promise you this. I'm going to finish it." Her eyes narrowed, the tension between us thickening. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm done playing defense," I said, my voice cool. "You and Ryan made a mistake thinking I'd just roll over. I've already gathered enough evidence to prove his interference, and if you keep pushing, I won't hesitate to take it public." Natalie's jaw tightened, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. "Jason, think about the kids. Do you really want to drag this out?" "The kids," I said sharply, "are the only reason I'm not dragging you both through the mud already. But don't mistake my restraint for weakness." The conversation ended soon after, with Natalie storming out of the coffee shop. I stayed behind for a few minutes, finishing my drink and letting the adrenaline settle. She'd come expecting to manipulate me, to talk her way out of the mess she and Ryan had created. Instead, she'd walked away empty-handed. But this wasn't just about Natalie anymore. Ryan was the real problem, and I had no intention of giving him the same courtesy. That night, I called my lawyer. "Alex," I said, my tone resolute, "it's time. I want to move forward with exposing Ryan's actions." Alex didn't hesitate. "I've already drafted the initial documents. We'll start by alerting his backers and business partners about his unethical practices. Once that's in motion, we can escalate if necessary." "Perfect," I said. "Let's make sure this sticks." Over the next few days, Alex and I worked tirelessly to execute our plan. We reached out to Ryan's backers, providing them with evidence of his shady dealings and legal missteps. The response was immediate. Several of them pulled their support, citing concerns about his credibility. Meanwhile, I reached out to key figures in our shared network, quietly sharing the truth about Ryan's attempts to sabotage me. It didn't take long for the word to spread. His reputation, once bolstered by Natalie's influence, was quickly unraveling. Then came the icing on the cake. At a business event later that week, I ran into Ryan himself. He tried to act casual, greeting me with a forced smile, but the tension in his posture gave him away. "Jason," he said, extending a hand. "Good to see you." I didn't take it. "Ryan," I replied, my voice steady. "How's business?" His smile faltered, but he quickly recovered. "Busy as always." "Good to hear," I said. "Though I imagine it's harder to stay busy without certain backers, isn't it?" The color drained from his face, and for a moment, he just stood there, speechless. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. As I watched him leave, a sense of satisfaction settled over me. The tables had turned, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was in control. Ryan and Natalie had underestimated me, and now they were paying the price. But this wasn't the end. Not yet. The silence was the first thing I noticed. The calls, the emails, the constant whispers that had been buzzing around my business just stopped. At first, I thought it was the calm before another storm, but the truth was simpler. Ryan's world was starting to collapse. Word of his shady dealings had spread like wildfire. Alex had executed the plan flawlessly, delivering the damning evidence to Ryan's backers, partners, and even his prospective clients. One by one, they started distancing themselves. At first, it was subtle, quiet withdrawals of support, a few canceled meetings. Then it turned public. A major backer issued a statement about reevaluating their relationship with Ryan's LLC, which was business speak for "we're out." I didn't gloat. Okay, maybe I did a little, quietly, to myself, but outwardly, I kept things professional. This wasn't about rubbing it in Ryan's face. It was about showing everyone, including Natalie, that I wasn't the pushover they thought I was. By midweek, my phone rang, and I wasn't surprised to see Natalie's name on the screen. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. I answered, keeping my tone neutral. "Natalie." There was a pause, just long enough for me to hear her unease. "Jason," she began, her voice lacking its usual confidence. "We need to talk." "About?" Another pause. "About Ryan." I almost laughed. Of course, it was about Ryan. She wasn't calling to apologize or make amends. She was calling to clean up the mess she'd helped create. "I'm listening," I said, leaning back in my chair. "He's struggling," she admitted, the words clearly difficult for her to say. "The rumors, the loss of support, it's all hitting him hard. And this concerns me how?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. She sighed. "Jason, I know you're angry." "Angry?" I interrupted, my tone sharp. "Natalie, angry doesn't even begin to cover it. Your husband tried to destroy my career, my reputation. He put my business, my livelihood, at risk. And now that it's backfiring, you expect me to care about how it's affecting him?" Her silence spoke volumes. Finally, she said, "I didn't know it would go this far." I couldn't help but scoff. "You didn't know? Natalie, you stood by and let him attack me, and now you're surprised there are consequences?" She tried again, softer this time. "Jason, I know you don't owe me anything, but this is spiraling. Ryan's talking about, well, he's talking about lawyers. Retaliation." That caught my attention. "Retaliation?" I repeated, sitting up. "Retaliation for what? I haven't done anything illegal, Natalie. Can Ryan say the same?" Her breath hitched, and I knew I'd struck a nerve. "Jason, please," she said, her voice cracking. "I just want this to stop." For a moment, I almost felt bad for her. Almost. But then I remembered the smug looks, the condescending comments, the months of sabotage. This wasn't my mess to clean up. "Natalie," I said, my voice firm. "This stopped being my problem the moment you and Ryan decided to make me your target. If he wants to involve lawyers, let him. I've got nothing to hide. Can he say the same?" She didn't respond, and after a few seconds, I ended the call. Whatever fallout Ryan and Natalie were dealing with, they brought it on themselves. Later that day, Alex called with another update. "It's worse than we thought," he said, sounding almost impressed. Ryan's LLC is hemorrhaging money. The backers who haven't pulled out completely are demanding audits, and it looks like there are some discrepancies. Discrepancies? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Nothing concrete yet, but enough to raise red flags. If those audits turn anything up, Ryan could be looking at serious legal trouble. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of his words sink in. Ryan wasn't just losing his reputation. He was on the verge of losing everything. Keep me posted, I said. I have a feeling this is far from over. Over the next few days, the fallout continued. Ryan's LLC was effectively dead in the water, and Natalie's attempts to smooth things over only made matters worse. At one point, I heard through the grapevine that she tried to set up a meeting with one of Ryan's former backers, only to be turned away at the door. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get more chaotic, I received an unexpected email. It was from Ryan. The subject line was simple, "Let's talk." I stared at the screen for a long time, debating whether to open it. Eventually, curiosity won out. The message was short and to the point. "Jason, I think we've both made mistakes. Let's sit down and work this out like adults. Name the time and place." Mistakes. That was rich. I debated ignoring it, but something told me this was an opportunity one couldn't pass up. Ryan had been cornered, and now he wanted to talk. Fine, I'd let him talk. But this time, I'd be the one calling the shots. When I agreed to meet Ryan, I made sure it was on my terms. A neutral location, no lawyers, no Natalie. Just the two of us, face to face. If he thought he could bluff his way out of this, he was about to learn just how much the tables had turned. We met at a quiet restaurant downtown, one I'd picked specifically because it didn't suit Ryan's usual flair for drama. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting stiffly in a corner booth. He looked different. His usually confident posture slouched, his suit wrinkled in a way that screamed desperation. The man who once walked into every room as though he owned it now seemed like a shadow of himself. "Jason," he said as I approached, standing to shake my hand. His grip was weak. I didn't bother pretending to smile. "Ryan," I replied, sliding into the seat across from him. "Let's get to it." He cleared his throat, obviously thrown by my directness. "Look, I think we both know this situation has gotten out of hand. Mistakes were made, on both sides, and I think it's time we de-escalate." I raised an eyebrow. "De-escalate? You mean after you spent months trying to sabotage my business? After you dragged my name through the mud and tried to turn my clients against me? Now you want to de-escalate?" He flinched but recovered quickly. "Jason, come on. You've made your point. The investors have pulled out, my backers are gone, and my LLC is dead in the water. I get it. You've won." There it was, the admission I'd been waiting for. "This isn't about winning, Ryan," I said, my tone cold. "This is about accountability. You didn't just come after me. You came after my livelihood, my family. You thought you could ruin me, and now you're asking for a truce? You're lucky I haven't taken this to court." His jaw tightened, and for a moment, the old Ryan resurfaced, the arrogant, conniving man who thought he could outsmart anyone. But it was fleeting. He knew he didn't have the upper hand anymore. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice strained. "I want you to own up to what you've done," I said. "Publicly. Admit to the lies, the sabotage, all of it. I want a written statement sent to every client, every backer, and every partner you've misled. And I want you to stay out of my business. Permanently." Ryan's face darkened, but he nodded slowly. "Fine. And one more thing," I added, leaning forward. "If you ever try to come after me again, personally or professionally, I won't just defend myself. I'll bury you." He didn't respond, just stared at me with a mix of resentment and defeat. Eventually, he nodded again. "You'll have your statement by the end of the week." "Good," I said, standing. "Then we're done here." I didn't wait for a goodbye. The fallout from Ryan's confession was swift and brutal. Once his statement went public, his remaining credibility vanished. His former backers distanced themselves completely, and word spread quickly through our industry. Natalie, who had spent years building her image as the perfect wife and business partner, suddenly found herself alone in a sinking ship. For me, it wasn't just a victory. It was closure. After years of enduring their games and manipulation, I was finally free. Free to focus on my kids, my business, and the life I'd worked so hard to rebuild. Logan and Ava were the ones who noticed the change first. They didn't fully understand what had happened, but they could sense the difference in me. The tension I'd carried for so long was gone, replaced by a calm certainty that things were finally as they should be. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Ava looked up at me and asked, "Daddy, why are you smiling so much these days?" I laughed, ruffling her hair. "Because things are finally good, sweetheart, and they're only going to get better." Dean, sitting across from me, raised his glass in a silent toast. His unwavering support had been my anchor through all of this, and I couldn't have done it without him. He smiled at me, his eyes filled with pride. "You did it, Jason. You took back your life." "Not just mine," I said, glancing at Logan and Ava. "Ours." In the days that followed, life began to settle into a new normal. My business thrived, my relationship strengthened, and the shadow of Ryan and Natalie slowly faded into the background. They'd underestimated me, but more importantly, they'd underestimated what I was fighting for. My family, my integrity, my future. On a quiet Saturday afternoon, as I watched Logan and Ava play in the backyard, I realized something profound. Winning wasn't just about defeating them. It was about reclaiming my peace, my purpose, and my pride. And I had done exactly that.